The 2025-2026 college football season is in the books. The Indiana Hoosiers, the ultimate rags to riches story, have capped off the first ever 16-0 perfect season with their 27-21 win over Miami in the national championship game. This is College Football Tailgate. I'm Dan Watkins. John McKechnie here with me as always. John, we were talking about storylines and stuff like that going into this game, and the one that we were most looking forward to would be Indiana capping this off, and they did with a really good national championship game, I would say. Solid start to finish, not like this crazy, oh my God, incredible. There was one or two plays that were incredible that you're going to see on highlight reels forever. But all in all, I thought that was a really nice end to the season with Indiana capping that off with the Natty.
Yeah, I mean, the first half, you feel like Indiana's dominating, but they're not pulling away, and then Miami kind of gets off the mat and delivers, what became a really, really good second half, and the fourth quarter in and of itself was awesome. Miami scoring touchdowns on back-to-back possessions, really kind of tightening this game up. All of that leading to the kind of legendary already Mendoza drive. I mean, it was definitely as far as other national championships we've got recently, I felt like this one, it was one of the more competitive, interesting start to finish ones that we've gotten, because sometimes that's not necessarily guaranteed.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of open Pandora's box for all these questions. Can this happen at other schools now? Indiana has gone from 2 years ago being the doormat of college football, the losingest program in college football history, to all of a sudden putting together back-to-back seasons, capped off with that 16-0, the only team ever since, 1894 Yale, went 16-0. So all due respect to the Bulldogs from the 19th century. But in over 100 years, Indiana, the first team to go 16-0, just it's wild. And, I mean, what more can you say about Fernando Mendoza? He is the ultimate gamer. I mean, he was under pressure, I thought, for the majority of this game. Sacked 3 times, hit a bunch more. He's bloody. He's got the bloody lip going on there in the first half. But one play to sum up this season and this run for Indiana. 9:18 left to go in the fourth quarter. 4th and 4 from the Miami 12. Indiana opts to go for it after Coach Sig calls the timeout. They were going to kick a field goal. He calls a timeout. They draw up a little quarterback draw play because they had kind of seen that Miami was kind of setting up in a defense that we've seen before from them. And Fernando Mendoza calls his own number and goes airborne for the touchdown. I'm getting flashbacks of John Elway in the Super Bowl against the Packers with the helicopter run. Kids, if you don't know what I'm talking about, just Google John Elway helicopter run. One of the greatest runs in NFL history. And that one wasn't even for a touchdown. It was just for a first down. Mendoza gets in the end zone and basically effectively wins them the national championship with that run. Just what an incredible story Fernando Mendoza is.
What a beast. I mean, that run was all time. There were several points in that run where it's oh, he's got the first down. The way that Fowler called it was so perfect. He just kept building the excitement as the excitement was unfolding. And God, when Mendoza goes airborne, you're what's about to happen? Is he going to get over? Is he going to get that thing knocked out? And all of a sudden the game is totally different. What's going to happen here? He lands in the end zone, crosses the plane, touchdown, and oh my God! I mean, it was insane, and the man definitely wore it all night. I mean, you saw in the post game, he even cussed. His forearm was so beat up, my God. And I hope that they partied on South Beach after. I know that it's kind of a long drive from Hard Rock, but I hope they made it to Mango's on South Beach and had themselves a time, because that was deserving of it. What a run from this Hoosiers team.
Yeah, absolutely. And then they got the heroes welcome back in Bloomington. Excuse me. So we talked a little bit going into this game, and I do want to just kind of hit on some things from this game before we talk about the story of Indiana and all that kind of stuff. But one of the main talking points, and we talked about this a lot, was Miami's size advantage. And on the screen, you could see it. Miami was significantly bigger, but man, the way Indiana plays, somehow they negate that advantage. And it's incredible to see what this team did. Throughout this entire season, they did it on multiple occasions against fronts that they were undersized and should have been overpowered by, but they just weren't because they are so fundamentally sound. I thought the Miami trench advantage did show in some flashes. Like, Bain and Mesidor did get back there a few times. Mesidor had 2 sacks, Bain had the 1. But ultimately for Miami, being the less fundamentally sound football team is what did them in Monday night, I would say. I mean, there was some stupid penalties in this one that extended drives. The Reuben Bain jumping off sides on the first Indiana touchdown drive. That was on 3rd down. That would have held them to a field goal. Malachi Toney fielding the punt inside the 5-yard line, which I guess, I don't know if you've seen this, John, but like apparently Miami was set up for a trick play there that just like Indiana's punter like literally outkicked the coverage and like ruined and blew up the trick play just because of his leg and how far he got that ball back. And then later on in that same sequence there, the blocked punt where they just decided not to even touch the rusher. And that's a touchdown right there. And that swing right there, that like 4 or 5 play swing, swung this game.
It did. There's some things to point to with Indiana where it's like, that they had a firm advantage. But, if you look at some of the other stuff, or like Indiana having the ball for 36 minutes, that's pretty significant there. But Miami with the turnovers, the penalties, that was an issue. But, they just it's interesting. Like Bill Connolly had his post game, and we always, kind of make a note of that, but we don't treat it as gospel necessarily. But to your point on the blocked punt, I think if you remove that, Bill Connolly had it as like a 14% win probability for this Hoosiers team. So that goes to show you that Indiana was in for a fight unlike they had really seen since this entire playoff run. Like not since that Ohio State game have they really kind of had to battle it out with anybody. So really impressive for them to do it, and they did it by kind of doing the stuff that they've done all year, like winning on the margins. Those little things that they do better than anybody else helped make the difference. I think that there's a lot of mention on the broadcast, and if you've watched Indiana this year, it's true. Like their secondary is the best tackling secondary I think like anybody's ever seen. Like Pons is not much bigger than I am, and I know the camera might lie to you here. I'm not a big guy. Pons not a big guy either, but dude's an absolute pit bull out there. He's the man. Yeah. Several other of those defensive backs just like they did not care if it was Tony, if it was CJ Daniels, whomever. They were laying the wood to him, and I think preventing those extra yards and forcing Miami into 3rd down where Miami wasn't good, that was huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about just like night and day difference between Indiana's tackling in the secondary and then Miami's, where it felt like anytime Indiana did get into the second level, they were picking up an extra 3, 4, 5 yards because Miami's secondary it just was not tackling as well. And you talk about being better on the margins. Something that we have talked about a lot throughout this playoff run is if you want to take down Indiana and you want to have a shot to beat them, well, you got to be better than them on 3rd down. Miami didn't convert a 3rd down till late in the 3rd quarter. Like you saw that graphic flash on the screen. It's like 0 for 8 on 3rd down. It's like, oh man, okay, so this explains a lot. And ultimately, I think Indiana converted 6 3rd downs, where Miami just had 3 of them. So doubled right there in that little category as well too. One other thing about Fernando Mendoza that I just want to say: those back shoulder throws were incredible. Like to Becker down the stretch there, like a play they run in practice. I always love that story. You get that a lot. Excuse me, I'm like losing my voice here. I'm so excited. But you hear that a lot, right? Like, oh, we ran this at practice, right? And we've been working on this since the summer, since we got together. And then you see it come together in the national championship game. Him just dropping that perfectly where only Becker can get it. I mean, threading the needle. The only thing I can say is, hey, Mark Davis, the Raiders, don't screw this kid up. Please. Like this kid, like you have a golden ticket right now if you're a Raiders fan, and you should be very excited come NFL draft time.
I know. Like he would have been the number 1 quarterback in last year's class. I would be interested to see a ranking of where he would have fallen in the 2024 draft class. But I've been kind of bagging on this quarterback class for this upcoming draft, and obviously with Dante Moore no longer being in it too, it's not like I was huge on him, but Mendoza, I think, like this playoff run in particular has completely sold me. Like I can see him, being a long-time successful pro. So yes, I hope that the Raiders aren't so just salted earth at this point that they can, find a way to not screw that up for him. And Becker, my goodness, I mean, a true sophomore, I believe, a guy from Tennessee who was like a 3-star. Kind of was up to him if he was going to stay at Indiana once they fired the previous coach and brought in Cignetti. I think he did briefly enter the transfer portal. From the Penn State game onward, I looked these numbers up yesterday, so bear with me. I might be off by a yard or two here, but I think he had 33 targets from Penn State onward. He caught 26 of them, maybe 27 for 500 some odd yards and 3 touchdowns. So sustaining 20 yards a catch and 16 yards per target over 30 plus targets, that's insane. You're just constantly, every catch you make is a haymaker, something that takes the wind out of the opposing defense. So with Josh Hoover coming in next year, and don't want to get too far out of ourselves, but Becker and Nick Marsh out wide, that's scary.
Yeah, I certainly don't think Indiana's going anywhere anytime soon. They're going to be relegated back to the cellar or anything like that. But you talk about Charlie Becker, feels like every time he did catch the ball, it was a massive momentum-changing catch, too. You think back to the Big Ten championship game, right? That huge catch he has in the second half against Ohio State. A couple catches he has here in the national championship game. The dude is just a gamer. And, that's really how you can just sum up most of this Hoosier team. They are just gamers, ready to go. They know what they're doing. They are fundamentally sound, and they just make winning plays.
100%. I couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, this was a team that was built on great talent evaluation, great culture building, great coaching, everyone pulling the rope in the same direction, and just playing sound fundamental football and playing just real hard-nosed and making the right play at the right time. It was a joy to watch from start to finish, this Indiana team. And for them to not let last year be the high watermark, but being the sort of benchmark, the new standard for them, it's incredible. You just don't really see this in this sport.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of us can be prisoners of the moment, right? And just because we're just coming off of this Indiana sugar high. But I gotta ask though, is this the best story in college football history? When you take everything surrounding this Indiana Hoosiers team, right? You have the losingest program in college football history, right? 2 years ago, they are the total doormat of the sport. To what they have done over the past 2 years, between what Coach Cignetti has done in his story and his staff, going from career-long assistant, being on Nick Saban's coaching staff, and then leaving to go to Elon or IUPUI, wherever it was first, then to James Madison, and then to Indiana, right? And you bring in Fernando Mendoza in the transfer portal. He becomes the Heisman Trophy winner. You become the first team to ever go 16-0. You beat Miami on their home field. And then the cherry on top, right, you're going to have the number 1 overall pick in the draft, too, on top of that you can sell to recruits as well. Just an absurd story. And you think of who they've knocked off this season, right? You knock off Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, the team that was supposed to be one of the greatest teams in college football history. Well, it turns out that might have been the case that the greatest team in college football history might have been playing that night. It just was Indiana, not Ohio State, maybe. You knock off a flawed Alabama team, but you wipe the floor with them.
Yeah.
Right? You absolutely put Oregon in a headlock and noogied them for 60 minutes like they were your little brother after you beat them in Eugene earlier this season. Right? And then you cap it off with that win in the national championship game, with that just iconic run from Fernando Mendoza that you're going to see for decades from here on out on every single highlight reel, because that was that kind of play.
Yeah, it's hard to find a better story. I mean, they show that in this day and age, this is possible. I don't know if a couple of years ago, without the transfer portal, without NIL, and not to say that this was a Texas Tech level operation that Indiana was working with by any means. And I'm really not trying to cheapen anything or by any stretch, but I am just saying that the way the talent has dispersed now, and it just gives hope to a lot of other programs. Now, it might be false hope in a sense, because now your expectations, if you are one of those programs that was probably more so in the Indiana zone of being either irrelevant or a bottom dweller, like, this is possible now, but by that same token, it's like, well, the pressure's kind of on all these other teams and it'll be interesting to see like the sort of copycat nature. Can this blueprint be replicated? Because I think that is much easier said than done. I think you can look at this Indiana team, and I think you can pretty safely say that like this was a unique set of circumstances. Like that, it's not just getting the hire right, but getting it right to this extent. I mean, I'm sure people like laughed when Cignetti, at his opening press conference was like, "I win, Google me." It's like, oh, that's funny. Like maybe you'll win, you go like 8-4 one year or something. No, like it immediately takes the boys to the playoff, and then the next year, 16-0. This is a turnaround that doesn't happen in this sport. Usually it's a sport of the haves and the have-nots, and then those teams that have been gradually building up, like your Oregons or your Penn States or whatever, like they just kind of get leapfrogged in the pecking order by an Indiana team that saw a path for them to get to this point, and they took it, and we're going to remember this forever.
Yeah, I think this is an incredible story. I think it is the best, definitely in our adult lives. Like, we're both in our 30s, right? Like, this is definitely the best story that we've seen since 2000, I would say. I mean, if you want to make an argument for maybe just the one game Vince Young, right? I think you can make an argument there. But all in all, like, when you put everything together, like, you can already picture Hoosiers Part 2, the movie, right? Like, you can picture the opening scene is Cignetti's press conference saying, "I win, Google me," right? And just like the laughing and all that kind of stuff going on there and then bringing in Mendoza. But when I think of Coach Sig called this college football's new world, right? And that it's been ushered in, or some people are calling it the college football revolution, right? Is this going to open the door for all these other schools now that have been, slept on? Like, did we just awaken a bunch of sleeping giants here? I'm not sure that we did to this extent. Like, you might see some more teams competing and maybe getting to the playoff that you wouldn't have seen in years past, but I think this was such a perfect storm with the right coach, the right quarterback that they brought in, the talent, the roster, and how they utilized the portal and NIL and everything. Indiana maximized this new world of college football, where I don't think that you're not going to get this kind of perfect storm every single year, that now we're just going to see, like Duke winning a national title or North Carolina winning a national title in football and that kind of stuff. I don't think we're heading down that path. I think this was just right place, right time, and Indiana just absolutely maximized everything. I think if anything, we might have been sleeping on the alumni and the boosters in Indiana, not quite realizing the kind of firepower and the war chest that they could open up, that they were able to do. But yeah, I just think everything went so perfectly and was just like, you had one shot to hit it, and they hit that one shot, and this is what we got.
Yeah, I mean, Indiana was 100-1 in the preseason odds, and that's coming off of a year where they made the college football playoff. So the bookmakers weren't buying it. So by that alone, as far as like long shots that have a chance, you look at that, and then you compare that to what the preseason odds for this upcoming season are. It's still mostly blue bloods. Like, Indiana is kind of the new addition to that, and Texas Tech also in there at 14-1, like just behind LSU. We'll get into those more a little bit later, but to truly be the next Indiana, you have to be largely counted out. Like, you have to largely be a team that is very much on the periphery, like probably middle of the pack to win your conference just alone type of thing, let alone going all the way to the national championship game. So it's going to be tricky for any of these programs to replicate. It's important for them to know that if they do things the right way, that it can happen for them. That this isn't the old days where it's like really the blue chip ratio was right for a long time. Like that stood as an axiomatic truth where it's like, if you don't have X percentage of like 4 stars on your team, you're not gonna make the 4-team college football playoff. If you do, you're gonna get waxed. You need to have a certain level of like that recruiting talent. But now with the transfer portal just kind of changing everything, now it's flattened it. It's dispersed the talent a little bit more, and these other programs that previously like just were leaning on tradition and everything, they have to adjust on the fly now, because a program like in Indiana can find a way at this point. It's fascinating, and it's going to be kind of like a reality check for some of these blue blood programs that have gotten by on just kind of having unfettered access to the best players for the entirety of like this century.
Well, you're an alum of a blue blood program, and I'm a fan of a blue blood program. I think from a fan's perspective, I think we're two people that are equipped to talk about this. How do we feel, right, about Indiana taking a national title? The Blue Bloods shaking their fist right now, saying, no, this is supposed to be ours. Like, you don't just come in here and take it. Well, guess what, guys? Indiana just went in there and took it. Do you like where college football is right now? If you don't mind, I'm going to go first. I like it. Like, I think this is awesome. I thought this tournament was awesome. I thought we had a great playoff. I like seeing that Indiana and everything about them, that they can make a run to the national title game. And I hope, and it looks like it's starting to get some of these traditional powers that have kind of maybe been resting on their laurels a little bit here the past few years to say, oh, okay, guess we have to do a little more. Maybe we have to rethink how we go about things, right? Maybe we need to be the ones to adjust to the new world, as Coach Sig puts it. And I think you've already seen that with how some schools are going after guys in the portal and opening up the war chests. And I think it's going to make this much more interesting going forward, however much longer we are in this wild, wild west of college football.
I'd say I like it overall. I like parity. I like seeing new helmets in these games. We had kind of gotten used to the same general like 8 to 10 teams making the playoff every single year, and the same 4 or 5 teams playing for a national championship. So it's really fun that way. But as a Georgia fan, I'm a little conflicted in the sense that Kirby Smart had just kind of like, he had perfected that early era of his coaching tenure, right? From 2016 to 2022 or whatever, where like he's just getting the best guys. The guys are staying on the team. They're extremely deep. The depth was crazy on those national championship teams. Now that kind of evaporates. What Kirby Smart is probably his best attribute was talent acquisition from the high school level. That means a lot less now in this age of college football, where it's like, well, okay, you had a pretty good guy on your team. Well, I'm going to offer him more money than you're willing to pay him, and he's going to come here now. And like that's just the sort of freewheeling nature of the unlimited transfers and the sort of wide open NIL landscape. So it puts Georgia's best foot forward, and it makes it mean a little bit less in the grand scheme. Now, I still think on game day, in terms of preparation, like Kirby Smart's still one of the best coaches, but there's an added layer here of what it takes to win a national championship now that he's going to have to figure out here, because I think like the only other like kind of blue bloods that I feel are really well suited for this particular era are Texas and Ohio State, because they have both the tradition and the monetary stuff to make it all work. But Georgia, Alabama, LSU, like there's a bit of like an SEC reality check going on right now with obviously 3 consecutive national championship games being decided by the Big Ten and no SEC appearances in those games.
Yeah, that's huge, and we'll get to that in a minute. Let's put a pin in that. I do want to just kind of follow up on one of the things you just said. I think it also adds, though, to this Indiana story, where it's not like Coach Sig just went out and took 4 and 5 stars from rosters across the country, right, and just threw the bag at them. No, what makes this Indiana story even more incredible, and I'm going to borrow a line from Dan Patrick here. He said this on his show Tuesday morning. Coach Signetti took 2 stars right? And by the time he coaches them up, they're 4 and 5 stars, and they're playing like that. And I think you were just talking about how there is still that aspect of, no, you got to be able to perform on game day and get the most out of your guys. Well, no one got more out of their team, maybe in college football history, than what Curt Cignetti did at Indiana this year. And I just think that's absolutely incredible. And one other thing about the transfer portal, though, that I do like is it's a road to the depth at some of these schools where Alabama and Georgia could be like 4 or 5 guys deep at any given position. And now those kids are playing at other schools, and it just makes, I think, for a better product and more interesting and more drama down the stretch of the season, because teams like Indiana or Iowa State, Arizona State a couple years ago, can make little runs here because they now have, legit starting talent where those guys would be sitting maybe second, third string at some of the big schools in the SEC.
So there's just different pillars of things that matter now in a way that it used to be a little bit more simple, right? And I was talking about this when we were talking about Dan Lanning. Like, he'd kind of followed the Kirby Smart mold, and like this had been a tried and true, like this is how you're going to build a successful program, is elite high school recruiting, getting like top 5 classes out of high school every single year. And I just wonder how much that matters now. I still think it's going to matter in the long run, but by that same token, if like these guys are unhappy after their freshman year, they're just gonna bolt, and all of a sudden, like, the whatever work you put in to bring these guys in and get them set up financially, it's like, well, I do have a better offer at another school, I'm just going to go there. So it's fascinating how quickly that this has changed, where it versus like how long it kind of took for this type of dynamic to be established. Not to say that the idea of getting the best players is a novel or like, oh wow, like how'd you think of that? Like, but actually executing that, it had been like the way that you have success at this level, and it matters a lot less now. It feels like it matters how good your coach is. What's the culture like? Are you able to keep everyone happy financially, and are you able to work the portal? So those two things kind of are married up together, and it's just a different era. And I'm still kind of like adjusting to it because I feel like it's happened so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it's this insane world, right, where the job of a college football head coach right now at a major program is 24/7, 365. Like, yeah. I don't know how these guys sleep. They have so many different things to juggle between the portal and recruiting and then game planning and practice and all that kind of stuff. It's fascinating to see. Some coaches have kind of tapped out and be like, nah, I'm good with this. So I'm going to go be a coordinator somewhere. We saw that with Chip Kelly. We saw Jeff Hafley leave Boston College, and now he's a head coach in the NFL, which I think I could do an entire podcast on that and what a disaster that's going to be in Miami. but anyways, it's just a wild world that we're living in. I do want to talk about some other stuff towards the end of the show that kind of fits into this. The Darian Mensah saga that's going on at Duke right now is fascinating. But before we go any further, though, I do want to say thank you very much for watching. We are College Football Tailgate. We will stick with you throughout the offseason because really there's no real there might not be games being played, right, for the next 7-8 months, but there's still plenty to talk about in the world of college football. So if you could do us a favor, hit that subscribe button there on the lower right-hand corner if you're watching on YouTube. We're at College Football Tailgate. If you're listening, hit that follow button. We know there's a lot of you that are listening that are not subscribed or following. Just do us a favor and hit that. It just helps us out as we try to build this show heading into the 2026 season. College Football Tailgate once or twice a week. I'm Dan. He's John. We're here with you. You can follow us on Twitter at CFB Tailgate 25, and you can follow us on TikTok and get in that comment section where there's a lot of fun at CFB Tailgate. All right, John. So since 2022, we have had 4 different national champions. We had your Georgia Bulldogs that capped off the repeat. We had Michigan, Ohio State, and now Indiana. And then before that, right, so you got the 2 from Georgia, but before that you had Alabama, you had LSU in there. Is the day of the dynasty dead with the way college football is set up now and how teams can just go in and poach and all that kind of stuff and how hard it is to keep kids on campus and keep your freshmen on campus that you were talking about to keep building that dynasty and stretch out the life of your window or stuff like that? I kind of feel like it is. Like I will be shocked if we see any repeat champions or 2 and 3 years here for this next like probably decade stretch until we get a full like legit rails and guidelines and regulations on NIL and everything that's going on with all that.
Yeah, I think that there's really, like I said, only two programs that come to mind for me that have the potential. Now, will they actually do it? I'm not sure, but I do think that Texas and Ohio State could still kind of have those dynastic runs as the sort of kings of their respective big conferences. You know, Texas in the SEC and Ohio State in the Big Ten. I think both of them could, but I think as far as like a Saban-esque run where over a 15, 16 year stretch, they're either like gonna make it's weird in a year where they're not in the 14 playoff, they're so not in the semifinal, that type of thing. Those days are probably gone, and I think also it ties into what we were just talking about with the burnout. Like I'm starting to wonder how if there's going to be a Saban in the sense of a guy that can be somewhere for that long and sustain like any levels of success, not even like trying to say like that Saban level, right? Because it's a 365-day grind. You have to recruit guys that you just spent a ton of time recruiting last year just to stay on your roster. And they're like 18. Like I feel like, and especially like the older you get, it's like the less you want to deal with that BS and the more attractive an NFL job I think would look to a lot of these guys. So I'm wondering like if we're gonna have like some coach. I mean, people are already saying like, is Sark cooked at Texas? You know, at the end of this season,
right?
So I mean, we're getting like real kind of thin on the margins as far as what these coaches are gonna be willing to put up with year over year over year. And like I wonder, you know, like with boosters now playing such a big role, like people used to say like there was such a big problem at Texas, like too much meddling with the boosters, but now every school is going to have that to some degree, and it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. So ultimately, there's still that select few as far as programs that you can see like having sustained major success in this time, but I think for the most part, we're going to have parity. We're going to have years in which the teams that we've been used to seeing our whole lives competing for national championships be kind of left on the outside a little bit.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to like redefine what dynasty is, right? Like I think to be looked at as probably like what's going to be looked at as like the best program of a decade. I think if you can get 2 in a 10-year window, I think that's going to be like considered borderline dynasty in this new world of college football that we're living in. And I think it goes back really to recruiting, as you were just hitting on, where keeping these kids on campus to be able to build that year in, year out and all that kind of stuff, it's just going to be really tough to do because teams, once they see you win, right, and if you have a bunch of 4 and 5 stars, right, on your bench and your second and third string, well, you're going to have schools like Indiana or Texas Tech, Arizona State, right, come through and it's like, nope, I think we'll take some of these guys because they're going to start for us and we're going to throw more money at them because, well, you already are so diversified and have your money spread out so much that you're not going to be able to keep everybody. And I think that's going to make it really, really tough here. So, yeah, obviously, I don't think we're ever going to see anything like Nick Saban again. 6 titles in 15 years or whatever it was. Like, I don't think that's ever happening. But I don't even think we're going to see anything close to like what Dabo had going at Clemson ever again, which was what, 2 and 4 years, 2 and 3 years?
The game's already like passed him by. Like,
right.
He was like the guy. He was like, could there possibly be an equal to Nick Saban? And then Dabo became that for a brief time, but you felt like it was going to last for a long time. And since the 2021 season, Clemson has largely been irrelevant. Like they had one playoff appearance in the expanded playoff back last year, and a completely forgettable game at Texas. So like that's how fast it can change. Like Dabo Swinney was on top of the world. Or of the college football world like less than a decade ago, and now it feels like Clemson is taking on water or is in quicksand, whichever kind of thing suits you better. It's crazy.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And then another thing that's crazy too, and you mentioned this a few minutes ago, the SEC hasn't even gotten to the national title game in 3 years now, 4 years technically. Since Georgia beat TCU was the last time the SEC had a school in the national championship game. I mean, we talked about this back at the beginning of the season, right? Is the Big Ten the new big boy of college football, right? Are they the big boy conference? And I don't know how you can make the argument for the SEC right now, especially with just like it feels like the Big Ten just added a fourth team in like their top tier with Indiana. Like Indiana's now one of the big boys in the Big Ten, right? And when you have Ohio State and Michigan and Oregon and now Indiana, and then you have like teams like Penn State lurking in that next tier below, right? And I expect them to be much better in 2026 under Matt Campbell. And then you have the USCs of the world as well. Like I think the Big Ten has taken that mantle from the SEC as the best conference in college football.
Yeah, hard to argue. The bowl season was abysmal from the SEC, and I think the SEC folks are going to have to get their talking points together because the whole when they lose they weren't trying, and when they win it just means more. Like that, it doesn't feel like that's holding up too well anymore. So the way that they played in bowl season, a lot of the times against Big Ten competition or ACC competition, like it just, I don't know, it didn't feel like they were the big bad SEC in a lot of those games. And obviously the SEC had a lot of representation in the college football playoff, but still no representation in the national championship game for the third year in a row. I think you can argue at this point that the Big Ten top to bottom is probably better than the SEC, but I do, maybe it's just my roots being what they are. It's like I don't think the SEC's trash by any means. Like I think it's definitely fair for anyone who's not an SEC school fan to after like 15 straight years of hearing SEC, like go ahead and get your comeuppance. Like go ahead and like talk your trash because 3 years in a row now, like including Indiana winning the national championship game and crushing Alabama on the way to get there. Like go ahead. Like if the shoe was on the other foot, I'd be ecstatic, right? So I get it. I certainly understand the sentiment. I've never been a rah-rah SEC guy. I root for Georgia, and I kind of hate everybody else. And I do find it a little bit interesting and a little bit rich that people have, mostly Big Ten people, I did live in Wisconsin for a while, they're like, all you guys do is just root for the SEC, and then when the Big Ten wins 3 in a row, they're like, Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten. It's a little bit funny to me that they hated the SEC people for doing that, and then they're kind of doing the same exact thing.
Yeah, I mean that's just fandom 101, right? Yeah. If it suits my argument, then I'm going to back it. If it doesn't, then I'm just going to ignore it and make fun of you for it. But speaking of the SEC, will they get back to will they finally end their drought and get to the national title game in 2026, the 2027 season? So we're less than 48 hours removed from Indiana winning the national title. But, well, we got to look ahead, right? And take a look at the odds board for next season. Indiana is the co-favorite, I believe, with Texas right now. Let me pull it up for you guys here on DraftKings.
Ohio State.
So Indiana and Ohio State, both at 7-1 right now. Texas right below them, along with Notre Dame. Drop off a little more to Oregon, and then there's Georgia at 10-1. John, I'm immediately drawn to Texas here at plus 750. What they've done in the portal, what they're bringing back. I feel like the Texas hype train is going to be insane over the summer once again, and they don't have a week 1 matchup against Ohio State this year to kind of derail that. But you look at what they brought in between Cam Coleman. They bring in the entire NC State running back room. Which is something that they desperately needed. I expect Texas to be much better next season, and I think they will be there towards the end of the year, maybe even playing for a national title.
Yeah, I'm begrudging, and again, like this is like a funny sort of like flying in the face of what we were just talking about with. Do you like it? The SEC? Do you like the idea of them getting buried? They do get Ohio State, but it's in week 2.
There we go.
And
it's at home.
It is. Yeah, whereas I was so willing to push back on the Texas hype last summer because we hadn't really seen anything out of Arch, and I think I was right in saying that he didn't really like play particularly high-level high school football, and he's just been kind of sitting there, like playing against lame duck teams and blowouts for the most part during the 2024 season whenever Quinn Ewers was hurt. And then this year starts off so rocky. And I'm like, see, freaking told you. But I did feel like after the Georgia game this year, something seemed to click with Arch. I do think that he's, for Manning, it's a little bit weird, but he's a better like athlete than a quarterback. I feel like his legs are kind of his best attribute right now. I think that the mechanics are still like way too inconsistent and things like that, but the talent around him is crazy. The offensive line seemed to take a big step back this year. They need to get better at developing that from within. I'm not sure if like portaling an entire offensive line is necessarily the key to success and things like that, but that defense is going to be nasty again. You add Cam Coleman alongside Ryan Wingo. And yeah, the Hollywood Smothers had been committed, maybe even enrolled at Alabama. And then they're just like, actually, no, you're coming here. That was huge. And they also got Arizona State's running back, Raleek Brown, I want to say, too. So,
okay. Yeah.
So, dang, man. I mean, it is an embarrassment of riches befitting the University of Texas. So, for me, with this betting market being what it is, like, you know, a national championship bet in January, shorter than 10-1, it like feels a little bit funny, but it's not going to get any better if you do like Texas for this upcoming season. I like Notre Dame. Yeah, I'm not just pandering. I like Notre Dame's odds here. I just am a big believer in C.J. Carr. Will be interesting to see. You know, you got to restock that receiver room, and you also got to restock the Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price duo. That's certainly no small task or undertaking for Notre Dame, but you got to like their chances next season. I'm circling Ohio State, and I know that probably most of our listeners feel like I'm a big Ohio State hater, and while that's true, I try to be objective on this show at least. I'm a little bit sus on this Ohio State
They're
team.
replacing a lot. And I know we said we were never going to like look at returning production again.
Yeah.
But man, they're like overhauling that entire defense for next season. Like, and then you got that week 2 matchup in Texas. Like, I believe, do they have to go to Indiana next year too? Like, it's going to be a very interesting season for Ohio State and Ryan Day next year.
Yeah, I think Sayan had like showed it took a long time. But like once the going got tough, you know, it's things started to unravel a little bit. And outside of Jeremiah Smith, you know, there's going to be no Carnell Tate. They lost a ton of receivers in the portal. Brian Hartline's gone, so like that had been like one of the most automatic things in college football is Ohio State getting elite recruits at the wide receiver position and developing them. That's a question mark all of a sudden for this Ohio State team. They didn't really like bolster that running back room in the portal either. I mean, Bo Jackson, you can certainly project a little bit of growth from him, but yeah, man, losing Caleb Downs, losing Sonny Styles, losing Arvell Reese, I think that's a lot for this team to be replacing next year. So I think if you're looking at the top of the board here and wanting to identify a fade, for me, it is Ohio State.
Yeah, and then one other team that we haven't mentioned yet that I do want to talk, 12-1 at LSU. Like, I'm tempted. Like, Lane's going to have them, I think, hit the ground running. I love what they've done in the portal, bringing in Sam Leavitt. I fully expect LSU to be a player in the SEC next season. I just think everywhere Kiffin's gone, right, he, like, immediately gets them a step ahead of where they should have been. And that LSU offense is going to be, I think, light years ahead of where they were this year.
Yeah, and I think whereas in the past you would always kind of give a new coach at a program like a buffer year, but like that Kurt Cignetti's kind of like erased that. Like you can't really do that, especially if you're LSU. So Lane Kiffin like has to hit the ground running. I think he will. I think that their class in the portal. I mean, it's like a totally different roster essentially with all like the movement out and the movement in. But you got to like LSU's chances. Is the Trinidad Chambliss thing? I know I should know this because this is a college football podcast.
It's still appealing in the appeals process right now.
If he's back, I don't know. I might like see if
40-1.
Yeah, I might see what's up there. Just just in case. But looking around otherwise, Texas Tech, they're losing a lot of that front seven that made them so good this past year. But they also bring in Brennan Sorsby. Although I did do some further digging, I don't think he's won a game as a starter in November. Maybe that's more of a Cincinnati problem, but maybe we're a little bit quick to crown him. Them at 14-1. Probably not interested in anything beneath that, though. I'm a little dubious on A&M, definitely dubious on Bama, and then Miami. We'll see what happens as far as their next quarterback du jour is.
Yeah, absolutely, and we will talk about that potential here in a few seconds. Since we're talking about betting, though, John, just season recap, crunch the numbers. All the picks that we have given out, we've given out like over 250 of them this season, right? 14 weeks of the regular season, plus another 5 weeks of playoffs and championship games and all that kind of stuff. 135, 136, and 2. So we finish a game under 500. Basically, as you put it in our little pre-show meeting, if you've been tailing us throughout the season, well, you have pretty much the same exact amount, maybe a little bit less than what you started with.
But it's been a fun ride. And
it has.
We'll always have that, 13-3 week or whatever it was. So
yeah, what week was that? Let me just pull that up here. When was that?
10
that
or
was
11?
week 8. Week 8, 14-3. That was the highlight right there. Week 14, we did go 12-4 as well, but we did have a couple stinkers in there too, like week 3 at 4-9. So, but
hey,
all
that's
in all,
a tough week. That's always a tough week. Everyone knows that.
It is. It is. I think that's like the first week in November. That's chaos month. You never know what to expect right when that chaos starts. So, yeah. But anyways, fun ride. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We've definitely enjoyed interacting with you when it comes to bets and all that kind of stuff. But, yeah. So you just talked about Miami's next quarterback. Carson Beck he's going to do something. I don't know. Might try to go to the NFL. We'll see. But anyways, he's been in school for 6 years. He's not going to be the quarterback down there in Coral Gables next year. There is an opening. Emory Williams just hit the transfer portal. So the U is looking for a quarterback. The hot rumor on the streets of the internet is that Darian Mensah is going to leave Duke and go to Miami and be their next quarterback. Well, Duke does not want that to happen, right? They don't want to lose their quarterback to an in-conference opponent or in-conference rival, whatever you want to call him. Darian Mensah tried to enter the transfer portal last week, and Duke is now suing him, saying he has voided his breached his NIL contract, which apparently, according to the university, is signed through 2026.
Right.
It does not let him out of it until January 1st, 2027, meaning that he is, chained to Duke, if you will. So this is about to play out in the courts, and of course, the first judge that this case gets slid onto his desk happens to be a Duke booster and a basketball season ticket holder, so he has recused himself from the case. We now have a new judge here. What are your thoughts on this? I think ultimately Mensah is going to be set free, and he's going to be able to go wherever he wants just because this is the wild, wild west, and there are no rules right now.
It's funny, like we had the DeMond Williams stuff a couple of weeks ago, and then this happens, and it happens like basically on the last day that this portal window was open. You certainly wonder how much tampering was involved here on the side of Miami, the same way that we wondered how much there was going on between LSU and DeMond Williams a couple weeks ago. I don't know if that was ever verified one way or the other, but it's it doesn't take a ton of brain power to kind of read some tea leaves here. But it's another reminder that college football needs to fix this soon because, if it's a contract, it's a contract, right?
Right.
And I personally, I would not want to do a legal battle against Duke. It feels like they're probably very litigious people there in Durham. So, oh boy, I mean, it's thorny. I think that it will be interesting to see how ugly this can get, and the optics for Duke of you're making him stay. You have this temporary restraining order on him, preventing him from entering the transfer portal, and it's like, well, are they just kids, or are they kids that are also making millions of dollars and have signed contracts? So this whole thing is just puts another magnifying glass to what had been kind of a black box, I think, through the early era of NIL where no one really knew like how binding these contracts were and everything. And for Duke to lure Mensa, they had to, kind of lock him in for 2 years for it to make sense for them. And yeah, now we're getting that put to the test right after the first season. So it's going to be fascinating to see how this one plays out.
Yeah, so it looks like as of right now, the court date is set for February 2nd. This is going to go to arbitration unless there's some sort of settlement. I wouldn't be surprised to see some sort of settlement here where Mensa is going to give some money back or something like that. But at the same time, if you're Duke, right, and this kid's trying to leave and now you're like trying to like keep him in your program because, by using the law, this just sets up for a terrible season next year. Like, how can you have him be your quarterback at this point? With everything that's going on. And like we talked about Damon Williams and like how he's going to have to kind of go with his hat in his hand, like to his teammates and like, try to like win them back over and all that kind of stuff. And Jed Fish saying he's going to have to earn the job. Like if Manny Diaz is like, no, Mensa's here and he's going to have to earn the job. Like he's just going to sit out. It just does not set up, I think, for a healthy environment, if you will, for next season for the defending ACC champs of all teams.
See, so that's one of like the it's a new era and it's exciting, but there are obviously downsides to this, and I think it gets reported on, it gets talked about, but it doesn't get like a ton of pub. But like I do feel like so many of these kids get bad intel or bad actors working on their behalf, and that's why we see like only, I think, 35-40% of the kids that enter the portal end up getting like better scholarships or better deals elsewhere. So, there needs to be, I feel like, better education for these kids on the realities of it, because I think we have a long enough sample in the transfer portal era now to where these kids need to know the risk of hitting the portal, because as we've seen, the grass isn't greener. Like the risk of leaving a place where you have a scholarship and some semblance of NIL money to your football career is over, or you're playing a D2 somewhere, that sucks. They need to understand. That needs to be a little bit more hammered into these kids, I feel like, so they can make the best decisions for themselves.
Yeah, I agree with you. And hopefully, as we progress through this offseason, that there will be some more guardrails and regulations that get implemented just for the health of the sport, where it's like college football just feels like on one hand, it feels like it's in this fantastic place coming off a great season, great national title game, great story with Indiana. And then on the other, it's like you open it up and there's just like this just dark matter just swirling around that like no one seems to have the answer to, where there are a lot of smart people involved in college football that I would think we should be able to get some better answers here and better regulations going forward.
Because like college hoops is dead. Like, I feel like college football doesn't have to look that far around to see how things can go wrong. They need to find a way to avoid becoming college basketball.
Absolutely. All right. Well, on that cheery note, I think that's gonna do it for us here this week. Our national championship recap. We'll be back next week as we start to dive into the offseason. We'll have plenty to talk about. Maybe some resolution to the Mensa saga by next week. Some schedules coming out. All that kind of stuff. Maybe some movement on the playoff format and stuff like that too. But plenty to talk about here. It has been a fun season. Thank you so much for watching and following along with us. Hit that subscribe button. We're not going anywhere. We will continue to put out shows. I think we're both big-time draft nerds, too, so I think we will definitely veer into the NFL draft, that kind of stuff, at some point in the offseason, too. I'm really looking forward to that. But anyways, for John, I'm Dan. John, I've enjoyed this so much this season. Let's keep it rolling throughout the start of 2026.
Highlight of the week, every week, twice a week. So, we got to keep this going, and again, as people know, SEC people love doing hypotheticals. What better time to just hypothetically crown stuff than during the off season? So we're not going anywhere.
That's right. All right, guys, we'll talk to you.